some studies in permaculture, really interested in mycology, and he's going to talk us through different sustainability and social change measures we're doing related to mushrooms, which is always good.
Thank you very much. Just briefly before I start, I'd like to just thank Sarah Pye for an amazing talk. The movement and the enthusiasm was fantastic. For me, myself today, this is like a new avenue of talks for me. Usually I do growing mushrooms, so today I'm going to be relying on a whole bunch of notes. So I apologize if I'm just sort of reading, but I'll try and be as animated as possible. Thank you for everyone coming here today and taking time to watch and listen to my little speech here. It's a beautiful day, a little breezy, but at least it's not raining. I'd like to acknowledge the Jinibara country and be thankful for the privilege of being on this land to share my insights. I'd also like to thank the Planning Festival as a whole, and in particular the medic Chris, who saw me last night because I had an acute bout of dehydration. So I'm a little bit fuzzy today, but we'll get through this. And lastly, thanks to the backstage crew for doing all the efforts of days and nights. Always love the efforts of the techs. My name is Heath Reid. I run a small business called Space Habitat Permaculture. I teach workshops on growing mushrooms. I obsess over mycology, and I wish to be like a fungus. I assume everyone that's here today also wishes to be like a fungus too. So let's discover the sociology of fungi and how we can learn from fungi in order to better our world and our communities. Ooh. Let's hope we don't turn out like this. And more like this. So, we are one big fungal network on this planet, a mycelial web of communal resilience, a congruent collection of custodians working together to protect and strengthen the natural world around us. Today, we're going to be examining how fungal networks, nature's most sophisticated communication systems, can inspire human community development. Now, firstly, I'd like to get a tally of people's interest for being here. So put your hand up if you are mystified by the fungal kingdom. Yeah. Now, who wants to be a fungus or like a fungus? So we already have a fair bit of fungi in our bodies, so we are kind of like a fungus. But let's talk about the sociological implications of being like a fungus. I'm glad you all raised your mycelial arms up. There it is. I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to be doing just fine. I'd like to begin by introducing you to the term known as biomimicry, which is learning from and emulating nature's time-tested patterns and strategies. There are many examples of biomimicry that humans have utilized for millennia, such as the Japanese Shinkansen train. The nose was modeled on the kingfisher beak, so it cut down on a lot of air pressure going through tunnels and decreased sonic booms that were happening. So that long nose of the train, inspired by the kingfisher. New types of swimwear that have been inspired by shark skin. All the little hooks on shark skin were able to develop into a swimming costume for Olympic swimmers, and they were able to go a bit faster in the water. Velcro, or the brand Velcro, is inspired by burrs that are released by plants. The tardigrade allowing for better long-term vaccine storage. Now this is to do with tardigrades being able to completely dehydrate themselves and rehydrate themselves and still be alive. So vaccines were completely dehydrated, and once they were put into the system of a person or an animal, they would rehydrate and everything was great. So long-term storage. Fungi have inspired better forms of bioremediation, high tensile building materials, and so much more. Now, who here has heard or read about mycorrhizal fungi? I know the Colonel from yesterday has, yeah. Few hands, that's good. Now, mycorrhizal fungi are the most important area underground of any sort of natural networks. Now, here's a quick definition of a mycorrhizal network. They're an underground system of fungal mycelium that connects individual plants together through their root systems, creating a vast communication and resource-sharing infrastructure, often affectionately known as the Wood Wide Web. These networks form when fungi establish symbiotic relationships with plant roots, where the fungi provide plants with essential nutrients and water in exchange for carbohydrates produced through photosynthesis. Beyond this basic exchange, mycorrhizal networks enable plants to share resources with one another, transfer carbon, nitrogen, and other nutrients to trees in need, warn neighboring plants about pest or disease threats through chemical signals, and even support seedlings by channeling resources from established trees to younger ones. This invisible underground network fundamentally challenges our understanding of forests and collections of competing individuals, revealing them instead as complex, cooperative communities where resources flow according to need through fungal connections that can span many acres of forest. Take that, Darwin. So I like to call them the mycelia sans frontiers. That is my fantastic little ruining of a logo. Apologies to Medicine Sans Frontiers. Très bien. Okay. So, mycorrhizal networks are awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping, mind-bending, and constantly surprising little creatures, and are literally responsible for the evolution of life on planet Earth back when a simple aquatic alga was floating in a Scottish primordial soup, and its resulting decisive brain fart meant that it was keen to head for land. However, just under 500 million years ago, when the plant came to terms with its excruciatingly long conclusion that this is possibly not the best decision to go to land, the very first arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi came along to assist this determinant push into evolutionary progression. So as early alga floated towards land, they realized they couldn't actually produce any or gather any food or stay alive. However, mycorrhizal fungi were already there on the scene to sort of help them out and wrap around their root system or early root systems and give them nutrients and such. These early fungal assistants engaged what could be life's earliest form of mutual aid in plants. They formed a symbiotic relationship that resulted in a resource sharing, ecosystem resilience, and communication with what has currently been measured approximately 90% of plant species on this planet. Early land plants couldn't retrieve nutrients, minerals, or water from the harsh landscapes due to their lack of proper root systems. So instead, they adopted fungi. But also, fungi couldn't retrieve carbon, lipids, and other resources due to their inability to photosynthesize. So they attached to plants. And this mutual aid began. Combining themselves, they perpetuated each other's existence over the following hundreds of millions of years. Now, I did a little orchid walk. It wasn't an awkward walk, it was an orchid walk yesterday, and it was great just looking at different orchids around here. And there are specific mycorrhizal fungi that actually attach themselves to orchids and only orchids. And they still do the same actions, but they are devoted to orchids. Also was here for Javier's talk yesterday about carbon sequestration in forests and trying to measure carbon sinks and carbon levels. Now, mycorrhizal fungi are quite responsible for sequestering a lot of that carbon. See, they want it from the trees, so they'll keep supplying the trees with phosphorus and other nutrients, and then the trees will go, "You want some carbon?" They're like, "Yeah." This is an example of biomimicry of the Tokyo rail system. So I sort of talked briefly about the Shinkansen earlier. This is a more involved study, and it involved the Tokyo rail system in Japan, and they plotted out so you can see the large yellow blob on the screen. That is the Tokyo city center, and then there are cities and urban hubs around that and then they dropped a Physarum polycephalum slime mold into this. Now, this slime mold is a unicellular organism that is capable of mapping very complex roots and communicating information for finding its food, all without a brain, a nervous system, or any other organ we imagine when we think of complex tasks. These incredible molds are a lot older than our mycorrhizal cousins, which I like to add the grassroots action term. I like to call it myceliated action because it's a lot more complex and a lot more communal. This Physarum mold has been existing for over 1 billion years and are highly adapted to feeding and surviving. Inspired by the Physarum, Japanese scientists created a map of the Tokyo prefecture and surrounding regions with small amounts of food located in areas corresponding to major cities and urban hubs. They then released the slime mold onto the map, starting from the center of Tokyo, and the mold took just under a week to map out an incredibly similar complex rail network, which originally took Japanese engineers years to plan. So they were quite stunned to realize that, we actually did a good job. But it also took a lot longer than this slime mold that doesn't have a brain or anything else. A similar project was undertaken by Lynn Boddy of Cardiff University. She used the sulfur tuft fungus, Hypholoma fasciculae, to map out transport corridors between larger cities of Great Britain. To quote Boddy, the fungi grew out from the cities and made the motorway network. You could see the M5, the M4, the M1, the M6. I just thought it was quite fun. How awesome is that? That these molds and fungi are actually mapping out efficient routes and networking themselves pretty similar to how we've already been doing it, but with a lot less effort. If we look at other examples, such as the mycelial-like net of the internet, now this is an internet mapping simulation, I guess. It is incredibly similar to a mycelial network, mycorrhizal network. You've got larger areas like hubs, and then this complex web of information and resource travel everywhere. This is Liège in Belgium. It's a more organic town or city that's been developed over years, slowly, not pre-planned like some regimented cities. But again, the main arterial roads represent the real thick rhizobious growth of mycelium, and the finer areas and the junctions. They're, again, sharing resources. The human neural pathway looks like the start of mycelium. You've got the spores that will then start to extend into hyphae, join into mycelium, have large fungal knots where you can see the interneurons and motor neurons. Again, this network is just all around us. The universe also looks exactly the same, or similar, really. But all these are just networks that have different areas of structure and information sharing and resources, and I guess you could just call them the absolute power of connection. These diverse connections create redundancies, backup systems, multiple pathways to ensure information and resources are always flowing. What are the main areas that we can learn from fungi, in particular the mutualistic mycorrhizal fungi, and apply them to our communities? Well, I've got just some short lists. I do have the descriptions of these places, but for the sake of this talk, I'm just going to drop them here. So we've got community pantries and libraries. This could be considered a resource sharing system. Now, community pantries operate on the principle of abundance flowing to areas of need, just as fungal networks redistribute nutrients. They recognize that resources within a community naturally fluctuate. Time banking. It creates a system where everyone's time is valued equally, similar to how fungal networks don't prioritize certain trees based on size or species. Time banking creates connections between community members, who might otherwise never interact, building social capital while addressing practical needs. Community gardens. These functions as living demonstrations of mycorrhizal principles, often literally harboring fungal networks in their soils. These gardens create opportunities for intergenerational knowledge transfer, with experienced gardeners mentoring beginners. We can come to knowledge networks or mentoring programs. Like mother trees that support younger saplings through mycorrhizal connections, mentorship programs facilitate the flow of wisdom and experience to those who can benefit. By engaging these connections, these relationships benefit both parties. Mentors gain fresh perspectives and satisfaction, while mentees receive guidance and support. Skill sharing workshops. They create temporary knowledge networks, allowing expertise to flow throughout the community. These gatherings democratize knowledge by recognizing that everyone has something of value to teach. Skill sharing truly emphasizes mutual aid and relationship building. This is something most noted about mycorrhizal networks, their mutual aid. Open documentation systems. These create community memory, like how fungal networks maintain and transmit information. These systems capture and share collective knowledge in accessible formats. Regular maintenance and updating, like the continuous renewal of mycelial connections, keeps these knowledge bases relevant and useful. Community spaces, which could be part of connection infrastructure of the mycelial network. These physical community spaces function as network hubs where diverse connections form and strengthen. These third spaces should incorporate universal design principles to welcome people of all abilities and include features that encourage lingering conversation. The best examples respond to specific community needs while remaining flexible enough to evolve over time. Digital platforms. Now, it may seem weird, digital platforms, mycorrhizal networks, what's happening here? Well, digital platforms can extend community connections beyond physical limitations, comparable to how fungal networks connect organisms that are physically distant. So as we heard the Colonel yesterday, that he's got his mycorrhizal network in his farm, these are all connecting trees that are physically separate from each other. They're not in large groups. Now that sort of extended community connection is fantastic for accessibility and community-governed digital spaces that prioritize member needs over commercial interests and implement approaches that foster positive interaction while addressing harmful behavior. So a better digital social network, unlike our current choices headed by fascist maniacs who love to send out their Roman love for people, or who buy up half of Hawaii, or perhaps force delivery drivers to urinate into bottles. But I don't think fungi would ever do that. They're much nicer. Absolutely. They do, right. Regular gatherings. Like a good anti-fascist does, regular gatherings create rhythms of connection that strengthen community bonds over time, allowing to develop trust progressively between participants. By involving rituals that create shared meaning, the most revered gatherings constantly evolve while maintaining their core purpose and adapting to changing needs. Mutual aid networks. I've already mentioned mycorrhizal fungal networks are the absolute goat of mutual aid networks. Like, they are the ones from the beginning. These networks embody the fungal principle that resources should flow where they're needed without centralized control. Effective mutual aid systems emphasize reciprocity over time rather than immediate exchange, create low barrier ways to participate, and build relationships alongside resource sharing. Distributed leadership. Distributed leadership moves from hierarchical to networked organizational structures, similar to how fungal networks function without centralized control. By balancing autonomy with accountability and investing in developing leadership through community, This approach increases resilience by ensuring continued functionality even when key individuals are unavailable. Emergency response networks. These networks, they reflect fungal principles as well, seeing a trend here, concerning rapid communication and resource mobilization during crises. Effective networks can map vulnerable community members, and develop specific support plans, all while conditions constantly change. Now, decision-making approaches and consensus processes. These processes incorporate diverse perspectives into community decisions, recognizing that, like in fungal networks, the whole system benefits from integrating varied information. These approaches prioritize finding solutions that address core concerns from all participants, rather than defaulting to majority rule. When implemented thoughtfully, consensus builds stronger commitment to decisions while developing community capacity for creative problem solving. Systems thinking. Systems thinking views challenges through the lens of interconnection, just as fungal networks integrate activities across ecosystems. This helps communities identify root causes rather than symptoms and anticipate how interventions in one area affect others. Communities using systems thinking develop more effective and holistic solutions by understanding how different issues connect. Systems thinking is also considered a major component in permaculture design. Feedback loops. Fungal networks continuously adjust to changing conditions using feedback loops, creating mechanisms for adaptation. Approaches we can contemplate for ourselves are social surveys, listening sessions, and by designating feedback channels for programs and initiatives while making participation accessible. By creating safe spaces for critical perspectives, we share how our input can influence decisions for everybody. Okay, I'm just going to pause momentarily and allow you to possibly retrieve your brains off the floor. This is going, why do you keep pouring all of this juicy opinions and thought experiments onto me? Can also see some people going, where are you going with this, Heath? Is your brain and motor skills being controlled by a cordyceps mushroom like that TV series? I can't deny or confirm that. What I ultimately wish to share with all of you beautiful people is that if we observe Woodfordia and how it's developed since the 90s, when it began as a tired and degraded cattle property, we can see that this wonder of human development has utilized and continues to use governance structure that blends professional management with community participation. It reflects all of the aforementioned aspects of mycorrhizal fungal networks. It even presents itself to your neurotransmitters in a psychedelic kaleidoscope of wizardry and cultural invocation. Wait, is Woodfordia a fungus already? Let's do a quick little recap. These are the mycorrhizal principles that are currently in practice at Woodfordia. We have organizational approaches that mirror fungal networks through decentralized structures with semi-autonomous teams. There is a sophisticated knowledge-sharing system across different community groups. There's resource pooling methods during the festivals and environmental projects. There is a deliberate creation of cross-disciplinary connections between diverse practitioners. We can all really relish in Woodfordia's environmental initiatives, such as their extensive tree planting programs. I mean, we're at the planting festival. We've planted possibly thousands of trees this weekend, but already there are over 120,000 trees that have been planted on this site over the past decades. Lake Gula, natural swimming facility with its biological filtration systems. Their permaculture gardens showcasing symbiotic relationships. Comprehensive habitat regeneration efforts that foster biodiversity. The very powerful rhizomatic volunteering system that engages over 2,000 people throughout the festivals of the year. The intergenerational mentorship programs across various domains, skill sharing workshops that create knowledge networks, community rituals and gatherings that strengthen social bonds. Well, slap a beard on me and call me Costa. I think we've just realized that leading the Woodfordia method is a great way to go. I think so. Now, had I been just given 30 seconds to talk today, I probably would have just unceremoniously said, be like Woodfordia, and then probably surreptitiously run into the bush to go hide out with my fungal friends. But that would mean I couldn't entice you to be a fungus too. So, instead, I have compiled the last roughly half an hour of my insights and delivered it to you in a possibly not so professional manner. However, I do hope that you've enjoyed what I've had to say in regards to connections of the mycorrhizal or fungal networks and how we can better ourselves for community, resilience, and the future, and are able to take something positive away from this. We can start making even more connections as we go along. Finally, I'd like to get my own feedback from you today, which will judge if I emerge or not from my tent over the next day and a half. If you could give me a cheer, a yes, a no, even a strange noise in response to my questions, that would be amazing. Is that all right? I think so. Did you enjoy what I had to say today and learn new perspectives? Are you enthusiastic about applying fungal wisdom more in your life? Do you want to be like a fungus? And the fungi shall set you free. Now, today is May the 4th, so I often like to say, may the 4th be with you, but also may the spores be with you always. Or in elegant, Luke, may the spores be with you always. Thank you very much. I am open for quick questions if anyone has one, or even long questions. Let's see where we go with these connections. The Colonel's up.
Heath, was your double major English literature?
No.
Right. Mate, very enlightening, and thank you for all your analogies. I'm obviously a fan of mycorrhizal fungi, which you're well aware of, and when you kick through the rainforest on my farm or you go to any of those border ranges, it's alive and well. Is it the case with mycorrhizal fungi, it's so clever, you call it the world wood, www, what do you call it?
The Wood Wide Web?
Yeah, it's much more reliable than Telstra.
Absolutely.
And it's free, that's what I like.
Smells better too.
Yeah, is it the case that it's so clever when an insect attacks a tree, through the mycorrhizal fungi it sends a message to its friend in the forest. When the insect goes to bite and eat that tree, it's already emitted a different hormone from the leaf, and then the insect won't attack it. Is that true? Because that is just brilliant Mother Nature if it's the case.
Yeah, for quite a few years it has been supposed that that is the case. I think there was actually a study at the start of this year that talked about it wasn't the plants directly communicating with the plants. It was, releasing a chemical or a pheromone, and then it was the fungi that was picking up on that and going, oh, this fella's in stress. But also at the same time, as a good negotiator that the fungi are, they would say, I will tell the other plants if you give me more food. So there's quite often some negotiations happening within that, which I guess would be part of partially mutual aid, but also, come to the negotiating table.
Yeah. The second question is, for a regenerative organic farmer like me, the beauty about mycorrhizal fungi is that where the drip line of the tree finishes, once the mycorrhizal fungi attaches or assimilates with the roots, that'll go out to a diameter or radius of 9 times, which draws in mineral and nutrients and water. Hence, that's how I got through my drought.
Absolutely.
In 2019. So that's the other great and the beautiful thing about mycorrhizal fungi, isn't it?
Yeah. So they're still using their time-tested abilities to expand way further than the root ball of the trees or plants. Yeah. And yes, very much so collecting water and nutrients and warning of any threats, whether it be biological or atmospheric or fires. I had a quick chat with with Sarah earlier, curious to know if there are particular mycorrhizal fungi connections with the Wollemi pine.
Right.
And if, because they're sort of sequestered in a little gully in the Blue Mountains, if they were able to warn of any threats of any sorts, and also if commercially grown Wollemi pines maybe aren't doing that great because they need a particular mycorrhizal connection in order to help them grow.
Well, here's a good experiment. I've got 20 Wollemi pines coming, and
Right.
I've got Romeo wood chips, so how about we plant them on my farm, put down the preconditions for mycorrhizal fungi.
Sounds good.
Then you can come down and do some scientific experiments. Sound all right?
That sounds pretty good.
Roger that. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to bang on about mycorrhizal fungi because
absolutely.
It's just Mother Nature at its best.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much. Anyone else curious? I've destroyed everyone's brains, haven't I? Hello.
What are you talking about?
I don't know, kid. So mycorrhizal fungi they're all over the forest around us, and they're helping trees and other plants maintain a healthy time on this planet and being strong and making connections and maintaining a strong community. So what I'm talking about is that we should look to these fungal networks and use them as inspiration to be better people, which we're all doing here at Woodfordia. So it's all about community.
That's really smart.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Oh, thanks. I was just wondering, how do you create the fungus? Is it just through organic matter and then it does its thing?
So quite often the particular mycorrhizal fungi will be laying dormant in the soils, and it just as spores forms. Sometimes they can actually be dehydrated mycelia, and once you have the plants in the ground, they will wake up and start to find their way to the root systems. A prominent mycorrhizal scientist, Dr. Toby Kears, or professor I think now, she talks about the worst thing for a garden is no ground cover whatsoever, because even if you don't have plants in that ground area, the mulches and the composts will at least keep those mycorrhizal networks alive. Otherwise, they will eventually decay. So they're always out there just waiting for their chance to wrap their mycelia around root systems and help out. Your microphone just there.
Oh, I don't need to belt it out. So if people who compost, I mean, would it be a good idea to get partially composted fallen tree branches and put them into your tumbler or into your compost, because you're going to get more more diversity of mycorrhizae and fungi in your compost?
If you're still using the best practice for composting, so obviously you wouldn't want to chuck like large branches and stuff in, but eventually, if you have those big piles of compost sitting on the ground in contact with the earth, then you will get mycorrhizal fungi going through it and starting to break down carbon sources and stuff in the compost.
You can just like filter out the bits of rotting timber when you harvest your compost and put it in for the next batch. So
Yeah.
I guess the idea is just that fungi will transfer from that rotting timber
Yeah.
into your compost, and you'll just get a higher concert. And using wood chips, so you use more wood in your compost.
Yep.
Anyway, that's just some thoughts I thought you might have.
So the idea of that, especially wood chips rather than branches, is wood chips have more surface area that mycelia can grow through and colonize. And so you use those wood chips, as you say, transferring to a new compost heap. You're doing what's called an inoculation of the new heap. So you're transferring that mycelia, that organism, into a new area that it can then feed and colonize and inhabit for the rest of time, really. As long as the conditions are correct. Got to work together on that one. Yes, mate.
Thank you for this wonderful talk.
Thank you.
I love getting inspiration on ethics and how to live from the natural world. And I was wondering if you could talk about what happens to mycelium networks when they're disrupted by development, or they're uprooted from their natural systems. How do they resist? How do they stay together amidst adversity?
So
how can we do the
a
same?
New development.
You know what we mean.
What was that one? Sorry. So like
Wink, wink.
a new housing development or something like that, where they're industrial ag, where they're ripping up the soil all the time. Yeah, that absolutely breaks up the mycelial network. And if, for instance, a new housing development is just paved over, or it's just grass or roads everywhere, or just no trees left, they've sort of cleared the area. Quite often those housing estates will be left bare dirt for quite a while before, roads go in first, but there's no ground cover. So quite often those mycorrhizal networks will either die off or will just move on to where there are still trees and plants. They have no reason to be there. They might deposit spores in the hope that something would change as an adaptive edge. But yeah, there is so much to learn about mycorrhizal fungi that, I'm still right at the top 3 mil of soil of delving into that. But yeah, everything is intriguing about the mycorrhizal network, particularly their resilience in how they can react to threats or to changes of environment. But they are highly adaptive. They've been around for billions of years.
Is it true they could survive nuclear war?
I've not heard that one. They might. There are species of fungi that feed on radioactivity. They have like a high melanin count, unlike me. But they sort of will soak up the radiation. It was found in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant under the big dome that they created. There were fungi, not so much mycorrhizal, but they were feeding off the radiation. A similar thing happened in space. There was a tiny fungus that was feeding off the Mir space station outside, and they were like, I don't understand why it's there or where it came from, but we should probably report this. And it was living through solar radiation in the vacuum of space. So we have a lot to learn about how resilient mycorrhizal and fungal networks can be.
Delicious.
Always. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just
Or?
one more.
Oh, yeah.
I've been experimenting with hugelculture. Are you familiar with that concept?
I am, yeah.
Turned some brilliant results out.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that, your understanding of hugelculture? And also we're doing biochar here, the influence of char on microbes.
Yeah. Well, you'd probably get a high volume of phosphorus out of biochar. But to go back to hugel culture, so for anyone that's not familiar with hugel culture, it's a concept developed in the Northern Hemisphere, so more temperate climates. And it's essentially digging a large ditch and piling it full of logs and debris and everything. And then the dirt that you removed for that ditch goes straight back on top again. And you end up with this, like, I don't know, buried compost system that will break down slowly. The reason why it works a lot better in temperate environments is because of snowfall, and that helps keep the wood moist. Otherwise, you can actually get a nitrogen loss as that wood breaks down quicker. So by keeping it moist, you get more fungi that grow around it and will inhabit all of that debris under the ground and continue bringing in nutrients as well, speeding up that decomposition process, and you end up with some delicious soils after that. So yeah, you're essentially mimicking what would happen over years of fallen debris in a forest and just doing it incredibly quickly and using fungi to assist along the way. But yeah, it's quite successful. People have done it in subtropical environments if you have the moisture availability. I had a workshop attendee actually post some photos to me on a bunch of shiitake logs that they had made after my workshop and thought they'd failed, and so buried them in a hugel culture, and then like a year and a half later they had all these shiitake popping up all over the place, and like, oh, okay, when in Rome. So they had some shiitakes, which they were definitely not considering. But yeah, the wonders of fungi. Yes, down the end there. Oh, we've only got one microphone. Sure. They are gross. Firstly, I'll say they're not parasitic, so they're not sort of attacking trees or anything like that. They're just, like other fungi, breaking down wood debris in the soils. And the reason why they are stinky and sticky is because that's their way of spreading their spores. So they attract insects down with the smell, and then when the insects land on them, they get covered in all of this goo, and then they fly off somewhere else and wipe the goo on a log or a piece of something, and that's how they spread. So you can remove the mushrooms themselves once they pop up, because the mycelial network's still doing its thing under the ground. 95% of fungi is not seen. So even if you walk around this like perfect weather for fungi, you don't see lots of mushrooms, but they are everywhere. You can smell them. So yeah, if you don't like the smell or the phallic look of them, just pop them out, put them in the compost heap. Any other questions? Oh yeah, just that.
There we go. I'll just add something for what that other person said about like radiation and that type of thing. They've only discovered in 2011 that there was a mushroom in the Amazon rainforest that can consume plastic. Paul Stamets has found that there's a mushroom that, well, oyster mushrooms can consume petrochemicals. So you never know what these mushrooms are evolving to, because both of those mushrooms are still edible by humans and animals after they consume those things that would normally be poisonous to us. So who knows what the fungi network is evolving into these days to be able to clean up what we've done to the world.
That's right, yeah. So bioremediation or mycoremediation is what you're talking about. And yes, there are quite a few fungi that are now actively used in cleaning situations. The most notable is that oyster mushrooms, or Pleurotus austriatus, they have a penchant for hydrocarbons, so they will often eat oil and break down hydrocarbons into more simple chemicals. In terms of real-world testing, there's unfortunately been sort of push to marketing more so that, oh, you could just get a big myceliated block and throw it into an oil spill and it will do all the work. And it's like, no, it's way more complex than that. And so more study needs to be done into how mycoremediation can actually be effective. But yeah, there are definitely a lot. I mean, again, oyster mushrooms, they can hunt down nematodes in the soil. They will like coerce them and then wrap their mycelium around nematodes and consume them. It's like, what? Okay. So you can, you know, clean your soil with oyster mushrooms. But yeah, the radioactivity one is an interesting one because fungi also have an innate ability to hyperaccumulate or bioaccumulate. So if they are cleaning or potentially cleaning soils, if you know that you're in a contaminated area, you don't want to be picking those mushrooms just in case they've hyperaccumulated particular toxins in their fruiting bodies. A big example is, again, going back to Chernobyl in Ukraine, there were certain locals that were picking the bolete mushrooms around there, and those boletes were hyperaccumulating cesium-136 or 137 from the fallout of the power plant disaster, and they were still eating them. They're like, yeah, that's fine. They're delicious mushrooms, like porcini and stuff like that, but it's like, no, you're also eating a lot of radioactivity, but they seem fine with it. C'est la vie. Yes.
For humans to be eating.
There are absolutely dangers in eating mushrooms. I wouldn't recommend just wandering off into the bush and going, there's one, I'm going to eat that one. Because even if they look, that was odd. Even if they look quite edible and smell delicious and you're very sure, you may not be that sure. And you could, in fact, have a very bad time with organ failure or any amounts of other things, throwing up, having a hallucinatory time. So yeah, if you are going to ID mushrooms, I recommend going with a very trained forager and identifier. I still am not that good in identifying mushrooms, so I will prefer to go with someone that knows more. Anybody else? Anyone got a brain buster or a tongue tweezer? No? Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I'm happy to field questions. I'll be floating around for a little bit here. But again, thank you for taking your time out for a little bit to sit down and listen to me ramble about mycorrhizal networks and how they can be better for everybody. And I hope you enjoy fungi a lot more and yeah, get a kick out of the kingdom. Thank you very much.